Okay, Stuart, we're live. Thanks for joining me this morning. The floor is yours. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and what you do for startup founders?
Hi, Connor. Thanks for having me. So my name is Stuart Prestedge, and I spend most of my time helping software startup founders and prospective software startup founders. And I do that through advising, mentoring, and coaching. Um, Anywhere from someone who's got just an idea and they want to take that through, all the way through to launch and then beyond. And I actually help founders all the way up to exit.
Mhm.
And I've been doing this. I've been helping founders for several years, but I've been in this. I've been a founder myself for the last 35 years. So I've had a lot of products. I've had 22 products, and I've had 3 exits. So I've been through the mill, and now
hmm
it's kind of my passion to help other founders.
Very nice. So maybe we could dig into someone comes to you, a founder comes to you and says, "Hey, I have this idea." What's the first step you take with them in terms of advising them?
Yeah. So the first step is if they've already got a revenue stream, I would say don't necessarily give that up straight away. Obviously, if they've got an employment contract, they need to check it to make sure that they own any IP that they create. But even so, there are things they can do. There are things they can start doing before giving the notice in or whatever, specifically around market research, um, ideation, speaking to people, understanding the problems, understanding if their problem, is a problem that there are customers that are willing to pay for, understanding the competitive landscape. They can start thinking about the business, their strategic decisions. Do they want to work with a co-founder? If they do, start looking for that, for a co-founder. Think about the investment strategy.
hmm
There are lots of things, but I kind of identify what they can do while they're still employed, um, and obviously they don't have as much time as if they're working full time on it. But there are lots of sort of big decisions to make and things they can start doing.
Got it. And then could you define, you say you work with software startup founders. Can you define software? Are you looking for a specific type of founder?
Yeah, so software can be a web app or a mobile app, or even some software that processes data on the back end. Um, the help that I provide is pretty much across the board. Um,
hmm
Whether it be someone, and I'll help technical and non-technical founders. So they both have, I find, gaps in their skills and experience and knowledge.
hmm
Some of it overlapping. So whether they're technical or non-technical, I'll help them. But a technical founder might have created some, deep tech, some AI model or something. But other than that, it's pretty much the same across the board. The supporting software around it, the business around that, the processes, the teams, the people. So the help that I provide is pretty industry agnostic um, help. And I have a process that I've developed which tries to cover everything, with the best quality.
Okay. And in a sec, maybe we can get more into that process, but I'm curious how you help non-technical founders, right? If they don't have a coding or engineering background,
Yeah,
do
yeah.
they need to bring on a technical co-founder, or are there solutions today where they can learn and build things on their own?
Yeah, they have options. They have options. So for those people who I'm helping, because I have a technical background, as well as being founder of my own companies, I was also CTO. So I can help them progress to a certain point before they need um, either a technical co-founder or an outsourced development team or to build their own team. Some founders want to give it a go themselves and learn Bubble, for example, like no code solution. So they do have options. And the
hmm
key is well, there are several keys, but one key is to understand their business requirements. And, that's an important step before you start thinking about actual apps and wireframing and that kind of thing. So that's one step which they can do. But also, if they do go down the route of a technical co-founder, then it's such an important decision to make that it shouldn't be rushed. So I actually advise and I help people not to need straight away. You said straight away, definitely not. If
Mm-hmm.
they can avoid
Okay.
it, it gives them, not only allows them to do a lot themselves with the help, it also allows them, it gives them more time, less pressure. They can interview more people, look for more people and find the right co-founder, because it's so important. And it's a process. Finding a co-founder isn't just about finding someone who you want to work with and that's it. It's a whole process that I take people through to try to maximize the chances of getting, the best co-founder.
Okay. Yeah, maybe we get into that a bit more, but I want to go back to, you mentioned Bubble, and I've heard of Bubble, and I'm curious, for someone maybe like myself, or like we're talking about a non-technical person, how easy is it to build something that is a feasible product, or going from idea to product? Is it, because it appears, you hear no code, you're like, oh, this sounds great, but I'm sure it's
Yeah,
messier than that.
yeah. For prototyping, if you want to go a little bit further than your Figma clickable wireframes prototype, if you want to have a little bit more, so something to actually let customers play with, then it's doable. I mean, and some people even write their version 1 product with Bubble. I personally think it's not quite a false economy, but there are pros and cons. You've got the pro of it's cheaper, you can get to market quicker. Um, and even if you pay someone else to do it, it's actually cheaper to do that. But it has downsides, like there's a question mark over scalability. It's only scalable up to a point.
Mm-hmm.
For example,
Mm-hmm.
if you have a solution where you're expecting hundreds of thousands of users, it might not be adequate.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you want to get investment, investors sometimes are nervous about not having your own IP, your own software, your own app that you're in total control of, relying on a platform that's maintained by a huge group of people. But of course, even if there's a chance you want eventually to have your own app, you've got to think about your migration strategy, and so it's as I said, it's not quite a false economy, but it's something you've got to go in with your eyes open.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to, the help I give to founders, whether they're going to use Bubble or there are some other solutions out there, whether they're going to try to do it themselves or bring someone on in house or pay someone externally to do that, whichever their strategy is, they should go in with their eyes open and evaluate all the options, the pros and the cons, and think into the future as well. Think about future possible requirements.
Yeah. So it seems like maybe you could start on Bubble, but if you truly grow, you may need to work with somebody externally or find a way to get off of Bubble to have it be your own
Yeah.
existing entity and piece of software. Okay. It's interesting. Yeah, because I have, in doing these podcasts, I've just learned about no code options,
Mm-hmm.
which are intriguing to somebody like me, right? But I think it just sounds really good on the surface. But nonetheless, certainly interesting. And then maybe we
I
could
am
shift
wary
back
of
to, you
it.
mentioned that when looking for a co-founder, there's a specific process or specific traits you look for. Is there a framework you use there?
Yeah, yeah. So for that, on that point specifically, um, the very first thing that I suggest founders do if they're deciding whether to work with someone is to look at themselves, look at their own personality traits, their aspirations and goals, um, how they deal with certain situations, so that understand themselves, which will give them a better idea of the type of personality that they want to work with them, as well as the skills, the skills and the experience. That's kind of that's kind of obvious, but a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people stop there. um,
Mm-hmm.
so and then really think about the criteria that you um, want for a co-founder, and have when you're meeting with a co-founder, ask these deep questions of them, and also allow them to ask those questions of you, because you will have thought about these things. And
Mm-hmm.
um, you've because it's not just about can they write the software, can they do the marketing. It's about what problems they've had in the past, for example, why, how they handled them, with other startups potentially. um, it's about do you get on? What happens? What will you do if you disagree? How will you handle that? How, because obviously there are many different personality types. And then the next step of the process is to have a probationary period. Try and do something, a little project together or something, so you can see how you work together. Um, and you need to manage expectations from on both sides of it. And then if you decide to go ahead, absolutely must have a partnership agreement in place. Even you don't need to get it written up by a lawyer. You should, but you don't absolutely need to. Um, you can
Mm-hmm.
pretty much do it yourself, but you can't rely um, on verbal sort of agreements. And founders do fall out.
Mm-hmm.
Founders do want to leave a startup, even if they don't fall out. So you have to know what happens in that situation, for example. And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Really quick. So, can you talk more about the partnership agreement? I mean, is that like the contract for sharing equity, or is it simpler than that at the beginning?
No, among other things, yeah. The equity split is important, and that comes back to a point I forgot to make earlier, which is if you don't get a co-founder straight away, you don't have to give them 49% of your company, because you'll have done a lot yourself. So that you have that option there. But for the agreement, how to handle um, if one of the founders is incapacitated, for example, or wants to leave
Mm.
the company, or if there's a dispute, or what happens if you bring on another co-founder? What happens to the equity split then? Things like that. Um, you put me on the spot a bit. I don't have that
No, no
fully
worries.
memorized in my head, but
Yeah.
these kinds of things. And I do have a framework for this, but um,
Yeah. No, I think it's interesting, right? I think it's a very important decision. And then, so you mentioned it, and this was kind of my next question is if you have a non technical co founder that has the idea and right off the bat they go find someone technical to help them build, is it typically that 51-49 split that you see? Do you ever recommend 50-50, or are there scenarios where
wow.
the technical co founder gets less? I'm just curious what you've seen in that regard.
Yeah, I try to avoid. It's very difficult, because it's an emotive subject as well as a sort of a practical thing.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than say I recommend this, in this instance, I would try to say, okay, look, these are the options, these are the pros and the cons. Like 50-50 is the fairest, but it comes with issues. And if you have, for example, a 50-50 split, then it feels equal to both, which is often appropriate if two people together have an idea and want to pursue it together. But then that's when the agreement will say, in this area, this partner has final say; in that area, this partner has final say. So, for example, you might have technical decisions, one partner has final say, and non-technical decisions another partner has final say. Um, and I've forgotten your original question, but what do I see and
Yeah.
what do I recommend? Yeah, all
Yeah,
sorts,
just
all
around
sorts.
equity splits. Yeah, typical
Mm,
equity splits, because I think that's a big decision, right? As a founder,
yeah,
um, who you give equity to and how much, and then maybe we can then go into how you advise people through. And I would think that you do this through the funding process, right? Because I would imagine that complicates things even further if you have investors and raising rounds
Yeah,
and things like that.
yeah. Obviously, different investors have different views, um, and there are different
Hmm.
amounts of equity, and but I I don't get involved in that sort of the deals, the actual contracts with investors. But what I do is help to prepare for investment, right up to pitch stage, and even tech audit.
Okay.
So I've done many of my own tech audits on both sides of the table, for startups and for investors. So I know what's needed. But my philosophy is to prepare for your tech audit as
Hmm.
you go along, so that
Hmm.
if you ever have to do one, you're ready. You haven't got to be scrambling, which I do see lots.
And
uh,
and what is a tech audit? Maybe you can describe that in
so
detail.
yeah, so when when an investor is investing or purchasing a company, they need to
Hmm.
check, they need to do their due diligence, and they need to check that
Hmm.
the technology is as stated. Are there any risks, or hidden costs, um, at a high level? And what is the cost of remediating those risks? Are they remediable? Are they really serious risks? Risks to the business. Um, and part of that process is looking at the architecture, looking at the documentation, looking at the processes used, looking at the team and the skills required, looking at the technical debt, the roadmap, their ability to deliver. There's quite a lot there, but and I'm sure I've missed some things,
Yeah.
but I I help the founders to do all these things ahead of time, which, trust me, saves so much headache and time.
What else do founders need to have in order as they go to pitch VCs or prepare to receive investment? I mean, I would imagine other documentation,
Yeah.
financials, etc. Like, so what outside the tech audit? If you can maybe talk about a few other major
Well,
things people need to have in order.
yeah. So in terms of documentation, yeah, I mentioned, the tech audit requires documentation, but just just before I answer your question, most founders roll their eyes when they hear the word documentation, but it's critical for other parts of the process as well. Um, if the strategy is to get an outsourced development provider, for example, then you would be wise, to get quotes from development providers, but to get as accurate quotes as you can. And to do that, if you have your documentation in order, your requirements, among other things, then you're more likely to get accurate quotes. So that documentation is important. Um, and So then, in terms of non-technical things, so obviously the pitch deck itself will contain, information about the problem statement, the solution, the market that is being addressed, and the niche within that
Hmm.
market. Um, so supporting documentation for that, especially evidence of traction. Now, depending on the stage of the startup, um, there are different ways of proving traction. Ideally, you want people giving you money, even if
Hmm.
you haven't got a product, but that's hard to do. I don't see that much. People actually giving money for something, but that's the best solution. So evidence of traction might just be letters of intent. It might be conversations you've had, with potential customers, and some uh, numbers around that. Um, Obviously, a business plan. You'll have your software. Most software want for people going for investment. Most of the time, they have a plan to be profitable and to get revenue and profit and growth. So you'll need a business. You'll need a monetization strategy for the product.
Hmm.
Are we going to do a subscription, um, model, or a one-off cost, or is it going to be free with with add-on plugins and add-ons? Um, or free tier, premium tier. There's all sorts of monetization strategies that needs to be documented. I believe, not just
Hmm.
verbal, but then there's the business model around that, the scenarios, the worst case scenarios, the expected case scenarios, best case scenarios, to show, you know, revenue, user growth. So that the business plan needs to be documented along with any strategy. Strategies for sometimes companies do business development through partnerships, and that strategy I think needs to be documented as well.
Hmm.
Um, I think you can tell I'm quite hot on documentation
Yeah.
because it aligns everybody. You've got evidence of the strategic thinking, everyone is aligned around what the plan is, etc.
Yeah. No, I think it's a good call out. And I think founders need to realize that there's quite a bit that goes into making sure you have a polished idea and essentially a company at that point if you're looking to grow and seek funding.
Yeah, I mean the critical thing is to get some evidence of traction because without that, I don't think you'll get investment. It's unlikely that you'll get investment. Show that
Hmm.
there is a market, there are people that are prepared to pay for the product or the solution.
Yeah, so with that being said, kind of, and I like to think of opportunity vehicles or market fit. Do you advise founders at all on their ideas, or is that solely on them, and then you just help them turn it into a reality? Or do you oftentimes say, I don't really see that being a huge market fit, or there being a huge market for that, and I recommend you go in another direction?
I try to be neutral and help founders with the process. The it's not quite a scientific process, but the methodical process of gathering data and getting evidence and you know proving to themselves, or at least giving themselves as much confidence as they can. It's never proof. Giving themselves as much confidence about whether or not it's a viable business. So I try to be neutral, but obviously being human, I do have opinions. So if I give an opinion, it will be look, this is, it'll be caveated with this is just my opinion, but you mustn't take my opinion. You must get evidence and data.
Okay, if you're willing to maybe share some of your opinions now, like generally, and I know you've mentioned to me earlier that you founded multiple startups and with exits, et cetera. So I think you understand the space. And as you work with founders now, is there a specific area or market or opportunity vehicle that you feel is kind of ripe for disruption or is a good place to enter currently?
Gosh, well, the hot potato at the moment is the AI and the
Hmm.
the sort of specific uses around generative AI. Well, I'm in two minds as to whether to not touch it with a barge pole because the whole world is going there, or whether
Hmm.
there's so much opportunity there that. And I have seen some good. I have seen some good actual useful uses of it. Um, and the key in this area seems to be take the generative AI, add a layer that where it's the expertise has been added in that layer, the expertise that the user hasn't got, but that the company, the software company creating software has got that expertise, and then make it easy to use so that the user is asked, is taken by the hand, and the expertise is built into here, so they don't have to be a prompt engineer or have domain experience or at least domain expertise. That is a great use. I've seen that used. And it all does seem to be around the marketing space, but I'm starting to see other uses. So that's the hot topic, and I don't know whether to.
Hmm.
I personally don't plan to get into it.
Hmm.
And interestingly, I can't tell you the exact. I can't tell you the exact story because of confidentiality. But I had a client, and we were talking about should we use AI or humans, and we discussed it, and she decided it might be better to use humans because actually people want to talk to people, and people
Hmm.
trust people. And in
Hmm.
certain cases, talking to people and having people backing up the software is a benefit, because people like people and they don't trust AI. Other areas. Historically, I've gravitated towards business productivity, partly because I'm an information geek. I love information, productivity, and all that kind of thing. But I'm trying to think. I honestly, I speak to
Hmm.
founders in all sorts of areas, and in every area, there's good ideas. What I think are good ideas. There's what I think are bad ideas, but ideas that aren't necessarily viable. But um, I think the you can only go on the data. You can only be data driven. You never
Yeah.
know. Um, Hopefully that answers your question. I can't think of anything else.
No, no, no. I think that's good, and yeah, I think everyone I've talked to, right, on the podcast, AI comes up currently. So I think it's certainly a hot topic. I'm curious if you
Yeah,
think, and the way I kind of look at it is, certainly think it's going to be majorly disrupting and here to stay and change the way we do a lot of things forever. But I'm curious if it's kind of like the early 2000s or when the internet came on board, where you have everybody going into it, and obviously there's going to be big players that survive, but there's going to be many that do not. And I think that may just be the reality of it.
yeah.
I don't know if you have any uh, opinion
I
there.
think it is a Darwinian kind of thing. The people the software that provides value, real true value, will survive, and everything else will fall by the wayside. And it's good that different things are being tried, and it's natural for things to fail and for some things that are tried not to be so good. Without that, you wouldn't get those really good, valuable use cases um, coming along. So this
Hmm.
it's I'm pleased that people are trying different things, and we can expect many things to fail or not provide the value that we would hope. That's just a natural part of the evolution of the space, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. And I know kind of all over the place, but I had this question come into my head, and I kind of want to circle back to a little bit what we were talking about earlier about finding a co-founder. And I think
Mm-hmm.
we talked about it a bit. And then how do you recommend that somebody finds a co-founder? Are there specific resources out there? What's that process look like?
Yeah, there are um, possibly too many resources.
Okay.
The same with investors. You can be bombarded
Hmm.
with people, and it's sifting out the right people, and that's hard. Now, the first place to look is your network,
Hmm.
um, and if you're in business, whether you've created your startup or not, whether you should be utilizing LinkedIn. You should be really, one of the things that I regret not doing sooner was building up my network of people. I practically started from scratch 5 years ago, when I could have been doing it over the last 20 years, however long LinkedIn's been out. Um, so I recommend to everybody you should be building up your network with people, because it's not just who's in your network, it's who's in their network as well. But the
Hmm.
first place to start, I believe, is your network. But there's a word of warning here, which is, if you are going to be partner with a friend, founders do fall out. You've got to really think this through carefully. Um, it's I think it's a big risk to partner with a close friend.
Hmm.
People do, and people succeed in it. I've been lucky. I've succeeded twice in this. I've partnered with two of my friends over the time, and um, that was good. But people do fall out. So the second place, yeah, there are communities. I'll definitely join a community. I know of communities that you can join. You can go to Founder Institute is good. There are companies in the UK, that do communities, which I know of and I work closely with. Um, A company called RecWorks has a Meter Mentor, sorry, not Meter Mentor, Tech co-founder community, which is quite successful. There are public places to go. If you Google where do I go to find a co-founder, you will be inundated, and the problem is the volume, which is why it's good to utilize your network if you can.
Okay. No, I think that's interesting, right? I think the internet's a powerful thing. So there's certainly resources. And like you said, maybe there's too many resources now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Another thing I was thinking through is if you're a founder, and let's just say you're non-technical, in terms of the cost to bootstrap a building a software solution, what does that cost look like? And I understand it may be
Mm-hmm.
difficult to say. Like, let's
Yeah.
say theoretically you find someone offshore that's going to create a software product for you. Is it relatively inexpensive or is it relatively financially prohibitive?
Okay. So the first thing, if you are a non-technical co-founder, especially if you're a first-time co-founder, and I found out a stat the other day which I didn't know and was surprised at, which is something like 99% of founders are first-time founders. So if you're a first-time non-technical founder, the first thing you need to do is get help, get some advice, speak to someone like myself, join a community. And do not just approach a developer. That is a really common mistake that people make all the time, and there are many reasons not to. The biggest reason is you will end up spending a lot more than you need to, and there's a real high risk that your product will be low quality or not meet your needs. So that's the first thing I would say. To get some help, and then there's some prep work you do, and then you can get a quote. Once you've done that prep work, you can get a quote, and you can get an accurate quote if you do the prep work right. Now, I've seen founders go to development providers and say, "Build me this," and been quoted under $10,000. But I've never seen high quality software built for under $10,000.
Mm-hmm.
So that to me is a red flag. Um, I won't go into the details of why, but
Mm-hmm.
building software is complex even when you know exactly what you want to build. Now, you can get, if you go to if you want to do low code, no code, you can do something $15,000-$20,000. If you want an app, you're probably looking at $25,000+ if it's kind of got any level of complexity, or the company that you're going to isn't using templates, and you have to be, there are things to be careful of there, to do, legal considerations, but that's a whole level of detail I won't go into. But $25,000 to me feels like a minimum to build an app, to get someone to build an app.
Does that
And that's
include ongoing? What are the ongoing maintenance costs of? Let's say you spend the 25,000, you have a viable
yeah,
product. What does it cost to maintain that app from a software
yeah.
technical perspective?
So it depends. It depends. If it's literally just an app and there's no back end platform, then it's really just, if you're not going to make changes to it, if you're not going to pay someone to add features, for example,
Mm.
or fix bugs, if there are any, and I'll come to that in a sec. But then it doesn't need to cost you anything to maintain, other than your Apple App Store subscription, which used to be $100 a year. I don't know if it still is. um,
Mm-hmm.
I forget what that is now. But one of the things to ensure when you're getting an outsourced company is that there's some sort of warranty period, that they will fix any bugs found within a certain period of releasing the software. So theoretically, if you've gone through the process that I help people with, there'll be multiple layers of testing. You'll have identified all the issues, because you've done it methodically, and if there any creep, any fall through the gaps, those will be resolved for free by the development provider because of the warranty period. So that's the sort of best case scenario. But if you have a back end platform, database, APIs, some security, etc., then there will be a cost to that.
Mm-hmm.
Now that really depends. How long is a piece of string? How complex, how much data, how much usage do you have? You can be spending $50 a month on a single machine, that services a few users, but obviously that will grow if your users grow. But then and that's where you have to think about your monetization strategy. Um, because sometimes if you have a free tier and it takes off, you can then find yourself having expensive servers on the back end, or
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
other there are other ways of doing it, the serverless, for example. But yeah, so your costs, how long is a piece of string? Your costs, really depend on the usage and the amount of data stored, and the choice of technology, I
Mm-hmm.
guess.
Yeah, no, I think that's super interesting. So, it's not rel it's not super expensive, but I think when you say $25,000, it's relatively cost prohibitive. So, with that being said, I'm curious if you ever see a non-technical founder bootstrap themselves and then all the way through, even without VC funding, and grow a software startup, or is it pretty typical that one, you need a technical co-founder, and then two, you need that VC funding to really grow?
Well, there are some people who spend their own money on it, so that
Mm-hmm.
25 plus. Some software is $100,000, $200,000 to create because of the complexity of it and the size of it.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a range. But I do see some founders that are self-funded, and there are many funding options. Investment isn't the only funding option. Um, so you can be self-funded, you can get a loan, you can get a grant, you can get friends and family investment. So when you say bootstrap, it depends really what you mean, because it is possible to do without investment.
Yeah.
Um, you
Well,
know, you, One thing I would advise against is non-technical co-founders thinking, and I have seen this as well. I will learn how to code and do it myself. It's
yeah.
that's years and years and years of learning that goes into being able to write a quality product. And even then, developers specialize in certain areas, front end or back end or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. So the chances of you learning to become a full stack developer in a short time is not, it's low probability.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, coming back to the bootstrapping, as I said, I do see founders who pay for their own development, but that's when it's important to get help, because you can really keep those costs down.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's interesting. I think just talking through it, it makes it seem more feasible, or, you realize the different paths you can take, right? Which is important. Um, So with that being said, I know that you said that you're a founder and you work with quite a few founders. I'm curious from your perspective, what are the top three qualities that it takes to be a successful founder or CEO or running a startup?
Number one is by far and away number one, and I call this the mindset traits. Number one is determination. You
Hmm.
have to, it's a long road. You have to be the sort of person who doesn't give up, who, if there's a setback, you get off your feet, dust yourself off and carry on. You learn from those things. So you have to be determined. And what drives that determination is often passion for the problem that's being solved or the area that's being helped. And that's often these days often an impact area. So founders are really passionate about helping certain group of people, or solving a problem that has real impact. So that drives that
Hmm.
determination. Um, Anecdotally, I see people who are just in it for the money are less determined, give up more easily. but that isn't based on a statistical analysis.
Yeah.
So that's the number one. The second one is be honest with yourself about what your strengths and weaknesses are, and get help where you need it. And the help comes in many forms. It can be, you can train yourself, you can hire someone or partner with someone, you can get an advisor, you can join a community. There are many ways of getting help. But if you're honest with yourself about your strengths and weaknesses, then you'll go a long way towards increasing your chances of success. Unfortunately, the type of person, myself included, who become an entrepreneur, become a software startup founder, are the sort of person who can pretty much do what they put their mind to. I can do this myself. I can do it, and chances are they can do it themselves, but it takes time and energy.
Mm-hmm.
Takes you away. Lost opportunity cost.
Mm-hmm.
The quality of certain things isn't necessarily as good as if you paid an expert to do it. So it is a balancing act between knowing what to do yourself and what not. As well as the cost angle. And the third one,
Mm-hmm. Number three.
yeah, difficult. Number three, there are lots of other things. There are a few other things, but which one would I pick?
No
um,
worries. Take your time.
be methodical. Be focus on the job at hand. Do a good job. Don't be distracted. Don't be defocused. Prioritize things. Um, go into depth. Don't go on the surface level of things and flip between things, but like try and do a job properly. And really manage your time properly. I'm going to do my market research today. I'm going to focus on speaking to these customers or researching competitors, or I'm going to focus on so really try and be disciplined, I guess, with your time. I guess is the way of summarizing that. And
Okay. Yeah, no, I
uh,
think that's all great advice. And then so maybe on the flip side, what is the biggest mistake you see people make?
by far and away, approaching development provider straight away,
Mm, okay.
which I mentioned earlier. I that's the one thing that I say to people: don't do. The other thing, well, there are quite a few. I've got some resources on this, but I think another big mistake that people make, is waiting till they need investment before approaching investors.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that you should start building investor relationships early. As soon as you think there's a possibility that you might need investment, start building those relationships. Reach
Mm-hmm.
out, make them aware of what you're doing, ask them if they would like to learn more or would like to be updated on these things, and be honest and open. We're not looking for investment yet, but we might be in the future. Um, that's another mistake I think people make. And
Okay.
do you want a third one?
Sure.
Um,
Yeah, let's do three and
uh,
three.
3 and 3. What's the third? I think possibly um, it's a joint third place between not. So I've cheated a little bit.
Okay, okay.
not
No way.
doing not doing ongoing market research and ongoing customer relationship building, and joint third place with not understanding requirements before starting to design and build product, before approaching development providers or letting your developers loose, as it were. Not
Hmm.
not properly understanding your business and technology requirements.
And can you expand on that? What you mean by business and tech requirements?
Yeah. So when you're kind of understanding the problem that you want to solve, and the types of people that you're trying to help, and the solution you're trying to build, there will be business requirements. You have requirements that are based on your aspirations for the business and the model, and any sort of legal requirements that come in, and compliance requirements, and there's
Mm-hmm.
a whole bunch of things that feed into the business requirements. You might have timing requirements or revenue-based requirements. So basically, what it means is, what do you need? What do you need from your technology on a business level, and then on a technology level, the technology requirements are, in simplistic terms, the user stories. So there's functional and non-functional requirements. On the functional requirements, it's basically your user stories. I don't know if you've heard of that term. That all
Yeah.
the things that the user can do, but not just that, all the types of user that you have, and all the roles, the different roles they have, the different states those users have. And for each of those user type, state, and role, you have all the things that the user can see and all the things the user can do. So they
Mm-hmm.
are the requirements, the functional requirements. The non-functional requirements, and this very often is left out, are things like your security, your compliance, the timings, costings of the platform, any reporting, analytics requirements, um, internationalization, languages and cultures and things like that. Any specific technology requirements, like sometimes you have to use, AWS because you've got $100,000 of credit, or you have to use Ethereum blockchain because that's what your investor has stipulated.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm sure again, there's tons I've missed out, and this is just off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Um,
I,
but
I think the message, right, is that there's a lot more that goes into it than you think. And
yeah,
I think it goes back into doing your due diligence and documentation. I think you talked about that earlier. So things along those
yeah,
lines.
that's right.
Okay.
There is a lot to it, and there are a lot of pitfalls. And if you don't do these things, it costs you money because the development provider will perhaps make a decision that doesn't meet your requirements. So you have to backtrack and do something, or you haven't thought of something. So that you tell the development provider, and they say, well, that's another $5,000. Things
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah,
Whereas if you'd have
definitely.
included it in the original one, it probably wouldn't have affected the quote.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah. And I think that goes back to one of your strengths or high quality, the top qualities of being methodical, right? And
Yeah,
understanding what you're getting into and
yeah,
communicating clearly. So I think that's really important. And so maybe just to kind of round us out here, I want to pivot to you specifically and kind of your history, your past. And I'm just curious, one, what your why is, why you do what you do, and
yeah,
why you got into entrepreneurship in the first place, as opposed to a more traditional career path with a big
yeah,
corporate
yeah,
entity or whatever that is. So
yeah,
if you could share that.
yeah. Well, in terms of the entrepreneur question, I blame my dad. He had his own businesses, and I always wanted to. He didn't have the most successful businesses, unfortunately,
Hmm.
but I was determined that I was going to do the same thing and make a success. And work for myself. Um, I've only worked for someone for 2 years in my whole career, and
Okay.
I'm not the sort of person to be told do this, do that. I think. So
Yeah.
that's on the entrepreneur, and I am, I'm a computer person. I love technology. I love
Hmm.
information. But I'm creative as well. I love creating things. So that can be software or a business. And the thing about software and software startups is you've got the art and the science, the engineering and the creativity side of things, um, which suits me. I'm very passionate about creating, but also I'm extremely passionate about helping people. I love
Hmm.
to help people. If I could do it, for free, I would. I absolutely love helping people grow as a founder or create a successful startup or just solve problems. I'm a problem solver. Um, so, so this career for me, fits all of those three passions, and
Yeah.
my um, It's perfect for me.
Yeah, and so you talked about your dad. I'm curious if there was anybody else as you were coming up in the space or growing as an entrepreneur that had a big influence over you, and then maybe you could also mention what's the best advice you received as you were growing.
Gosh, yeah, I mentioned earlier about not building up my network sooner, and that's being one of my
Hmm.
regrets. Also, I never got advice. I never got a mentor or an advisor or a coach, and so I learned everything the hard way.
Okay.
And I half regret that, half don't, because I half regret it, thinking I could have learned a lot more quickly. And I've had success. I've been successful, so I'm happy. But it took a while, and
Hmm.
I've learned the hard way. But so I'm half pleased, half not pleased about that. But so I never really had um, that mentor, you know, figure. I did have advice very very early on, um, sort of just before I went to university. I worked for a company, um, and that was like that was one of the very few years of my life that I've worked for someone. And there was a guy there who, I was a teenager. I was an 18-year-old teenager, 18-year-old, and not able to focus. And I knew my stuff. I knew how to write software, but I was kind of fickle, I guess, like most teenagers are. And
Hmm.
forgive me, any teenagers watching or listening. But he taught me. He taught me, if you're going to do something, do it properly. And he was very, this pixel isn't right. This is not perfect. And although I don't advocate perfection, because I think it can stifle, um, momentum and etc. Even so, you need to be aware of what you're aiming for, and you need to be, you need to try and do the best to do things properly. So he advised me to, to make sure I try to do things properly.
Hmm.
And then, role models. I think probably the closest I have to a role model is probably Bill Gates.
Yeah.
Just him
Hmm.
creating Microsoft, and you know, he's passionate, but not necessarily wasn't outspoken.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm I'm a little bit like that personality wise. I'm very passionate about what I do, but I'm not someone who will shout from the rooftops. Um,
Yeah.
but I guess hopefully that answers your question.
No, I think it certainly does, and so maybe just to kind of round us out here, I think one of the themes throughout the conversation has been seek advice. Right? You mentioned
Yeah,
that. Do not go to a
yeah,
developer to begin with, and obviously you provide that advice through your consulting services. So one, I want to understand, we talked about what it costs to build a software, but in terms of having that mentor and coach for a founder, is that relatively cost prohibitive? And I don't know if you're willing or able to share kind of what it looks like to work with you from
yeah.
a time commitment and a cost perspective.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I'm very passionate about helping founders, and if I didn't need to put food on the table, then I would do it for free. But yeah, so I try to be flexible in this regard. So some of my clients use me on an ad hoc basis, hour here, a couple of hours there.
Hmm.
Some regular, some not regular. But I also have a mentorship program, which is a 12-week program that aims to help founders in as many ways as possible, which includes one-to-one advisory sessions, group coaching sessions, 24/7 Slack support, and a training course. I mentioned the methodology that I've developed, the process I've developed. All the steps. I've created that I've turned that into a training course, and that's part of the mentorship program. and that's a very cost effective. That's a very cost effective way of getting 12 weeks of help with whatever you need as a founder. Because every founder hits problems, has worries
Mm-hmm.
and concerns, issues, and they need to overcome, decisions they need to make. Um, so that's a really cost-effective way of having me in your corner, but not just me, the other founders on the program as well.
No, I think that sounds great. I like that there's flexibility, right? High touch, a little lower touch self service that you offer. And so maybe we can close out here. I'll give you the floor. How can people connect with you? And then how can people sign up for that mentorship program or access you for one on one coaching and mentoring?
Yeah, yeah. So I'll give you a link, which hopefully you can make available to your
Yeah.
listeners. Yeah, so I'll give
Hmm.
you a link, which is to the mentorship program, and there's a button on there which you can book a call with me or my team. And but you can also reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'll give you my LinkedIn link as well. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Don't be shy. Connect with me. Message me. Tell me about yourself. Tell me about your needs. We can have a chat. Decide, if it's right for me to help you. I'm honest about who I can help. Um, and we can have a chat. You can find out about the mentorship program or the other ways that I can help you. So yeah, so I'll give you a URL to the mentorship page, and I'll give you my LinkedIn URL.
Yeah. Awesome, Stuart. Yeah. And like I said, all your information will be in the description of this episode. So your LinkedIn, link to your website and everything. So yeah, guys, check it out in the description. And hey, I want to thank you for taking the time this morning. And I think you're doing a great thing by helping people bring their ideas to life. So I wish you the best of luck in the future.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, and thanks for having me.
Mhm.